I'm EZRAH reporting on the hottest issues and the biggest stories. This is the Manila Times. Israel is facing threats from all sides aside from Gaza, as neighboring countries Lebanon and Syria are also launching their own attack in the countryside. Israel has formally declared war against the Palestinian Islamist militant group Hamas, following a surprise attack last October 7th during Israel's most sacred day, Simchat Torah. Hamas launched a large-scale invasion and offensive attack against Israel from the Gaza Strip, breaking through the Gaza-Israel border. The attack caused hundreds of casualties. Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo confirmed that 2 Filipinos have been killed as a result of terrorism by Hamas. This was similar to an attack that happened exactly 50 years ago in 1973, which came to be known as Yom Kippur War. The U.S. has deployed their largest warship to Israel, whom they consider as their close allies. On the other hand, Israel's retaliation has displaced hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza, including women and children, according to a report by the UN. The Philippine government likewise has condemned the attacks, especially against civilians. Here with us is Israel Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Ilan Fuss. Welcome to the Manila Times, sir. You have our deepest sympathies in this very difficult time. Tell us, what is the current state of Israel, and is the situation under control?
Hello, EZRAH. It's a pleasure to be with you. The current status is that all the cities and settlements or villages in the southern part of Israel are under the control of the Israeli Defense Forces. They are still searching around to identify still terrorists that might be hiding in the open areas there. And there are still Hamas terrorists who are trying to penetrate and enter the southern border from Gaza into Israel. So the situation and the borderline itself is still open. It's very difficult now to seal it. So, of course, there's a lot of patrols. So things are not yet stable. We are still in the final stages of stabilizing, and obviously we're preparing for the next stage. The number of casualties, unfortunately, is going up by the hour because the IDF and the different specialized units are busy trying to identify the bodies of the slaughtered Israelis and non-Israelis who have been butchered by the Hamas. Some of the bodies have been burnt by the Hamas, sort of terror atrocities. It's difficult to identify, so it takes longer than usual. And also with the amount, so many. And here you have to be very careful and responsible to make sure that you are identifying the right person, because after that, we have to inform the families. And of course, only after that, the names would be published. So we are still in the process of finalizing identification of the deceased. Injured, of course, are in hospitals. We have more than 2,600 Israelis who have been injured, and we have more than 1,000 who have been killed. I read that now I think it's up to 1,200, and the numbers are growing by the hour. And of course, we have the kidnapped who have been taken hostage by the Hamas. So situation is not yet stabilized.
Sir, do you have the numbers? How many deaths has it been, and how many are injured?
So I'm saying I think it's meantime 1,200. Last night was 1,000. I believe this morning updated to 1,200. And still counting, unfortunately. And then the injured, I believe it's 2,600 or 2,700, different levels of injuries. And the kidnapped is still being assessed. We know that there are more than 100, but still being assessed. It is important to emphasize we're talking about numbers, but behind those numbers, we have people. People that have been butchered by Hamas terrorists who came into Israel to slaughter Israeli people. Of course, there were also other foreign nationals being killed, injured, kidnapped, and amongst them, we know about 2 Filipinos, and this is my, I would say, opportunity also, or the appropriate time to express my condolences to the families. There's still 4 unaccounted for, and we pray that they will be identified or located safe and sound and healthy. We don't know yet, but I can assure you that the Israeli government is doing every effort to not only to account for, but also to rescue and to take care of anybody in Israel who is there now. And there's no differentiation when we do not discriminate between Israelis and Filipinos or FWs or any other foreign national in Israel. We are taking care of everybody. This is our responsibility as a country, as the Israeli government.
Yes, thank you for that, Ambassador. You said that you're also protecting other nationalities, including the Filipinos who are living and working in Israel. Thank you for that. And Ambassador, based on reports, some neighboring countries, Lebanon and Syria, are taking advantage of the situation and are also attacking Israel. How is the government handling this?
So first of all, I wanted to really to say that this situation I call a war. It's not an incident, it's not an event, it's a war. So Israel is in a war. The war is against Hamas, which is a terror organization calling for the destruction of the state of Israel. It does not recognize the right of Israel to exist, and it tries to murder Israelis. We have a challenge in the north. In southern Lebanon is controlled by Hezbollah, which is another terror organization, heavily weaponized. They have missiles, they have troops, they've been training in Syria, in Lebanon, and we have also militant terrorist groups in Syria, like Islamic Jihad and others, who are also seeing that there's an opportunity to attack Israel for the same purpose and for the same means. And we are giving a very strong message to our neighboring countries. Do not initiate a war. Do not initiate any attacks against Israel, because we will defend ourselves. We hear very strong messages of support from our allies. Especially, we heard last night a very strong message from President Biden with a strong support of the United States. Of course, there are also many others, but the United States is also mobilizing its troops to the area, aircraft carrier and others. We have seen a few attacks coming from Lebanon in the last couple of days, last night also from Syria. Meantime, these are individual incidents, and it's not a full-fledged war. We are responding to those incidents accordingly, but we are calling the other side, do not escalate, because if you escalate, we will have to respond, and we'll respond with our force and full force.
It's such a shame that other countries are taking advantage of this situation, leaving Israel vulnerable. How is the government protecting their civilians right now? And you mentioned earlier that the first stage is taking control of the areas that has been terrorized by the Hamas. So what is the next stage for Israel?
So we are in the final process of recruiting the reserve service, which are people who can be called to join the military in an emergency. A few hundreds of thousands that have been called in, and we're in a process of logistics and assigning them in the different proper locations, basically to make sure that we are ready on all fronts in case of an escalation in the north, center, and south. I believe that the moment we are ready, and we don't know when it's going to happen, we will also respond back against Gaza, which again, we are in a war with Gaza. At this stage, we have also airstrikes against infrastructure and facilities of terror of the Hamas. We are targeting only facilities of the Hamas, and we are calling civilians to move away and not to be staying with Hamas. Unfortunately, the Hamas is using human shields, and the citizens and civilians who are living in Gaza, they're using them as human shields. And at the same time, they are targeting Israeli civilians, which is exactly the definition of a terror organization. The Israeli IDF is targeting only Hamas infrastructure. We have informed civilians to move to different places, different locations. Hamas has infrastructure and missiles in mosques, in hospitals, in schools, in apartment residential areas, and in office buildings. People know where the Hamas is, and we also know where the Hamas is. We'll target those places. IDF is well known to be as accurate as possible, and we'll do whatever we can to avoid collateral damage. But in a war, it's a war. So there will be difficult pictures, but we have to understand Israel was attacked by the Hamas last Saturday morning, and Israel has to defend itself and the responsibility to protect its civilians.
Israel has made it clear that their war is with Hamas, not with Gaza. How can you ensure the safety of civilians in Gaza, women and children, aside from what you said, being accurate with all of your attacks? So how can you keep them safe in the midst of conflict with a terrorist group?
So that's exactly the point. They know where the Hamas infrastructure is, and they have been informed that this Hamas infrastructure will be attacked, and they should move. We have no war with the Palestinian people. That has to be very clear. The war is against Hamas, and will attack Hamas infrastructure. Please keep away, find safe locations that are far away from Hamas infrastructure. We cannot let Hamas continue operate the way we did until now, because the price is so heavy, as you can see today.
Ambassador, I remember what you said, you were very, the second stage for Israel is to prevent any more escalation. So you said that there will be, is it safe to say that there will be no retaliation from Israel aside from containing all of those attacks and preventing those attacks and defending yourselves?
No. In a war, you have to fight back. So you can see that the Air Force is already there airstrikes. What exactly, and not only airstrikes, also strikes from land and also from sea, again, against specific Hamas infrastructure. Hamas is still trying to penetrate Israel until now through land, sea, and air. So it hasn't stopped yet. They still have operational systems. What exactly are the plans of the IDF vis-a-vis entering into Gaza Strip and destroying the Hamas infrastructure? Obviously, I'm not privy, I'm not part of those plans, and this is something that would not be discussed over the media, but we have not seen the end. It's not only containment. In a war, you have to defend yourself, you have to fight back. And this is the next stage.
Ambassador, like you said, with the Hamas, the war will continue unless the Hamas is brought down. And I guess for my last question, Ambassador, what is your hope for a long-lasting resolution to this conflict?
So, in a war, it's difficult to talk now when we're still burying our dead. What is a peaceful resolution? But maybe it's important to say the charter of the Hamas is to destroy the state of Israel. This is also the basic interest of Iran, who is supporting the Hamas. And that's the same with Hezbollah. So as long as the Hamas is calling for the destruction of the state of Israel and is calling for the killing of Israeli and Jewish people, I don't see any peaceful resolution. We can make peace with the Palestinian people. We have always challenges of terrorists that are trying to stop the peace process and to get us back to where we were in the past. And with terrorism, you have to fight. And that's a global fight against terrorism, which the Philippines is part of this global struggle against terror. So with Hamas, as it is today, it's a terror organization, and I don't see a peaceful resolution as long as they are still carrying those weapons. And we have to remember, Hamas, if you remember, is like ISIS. And you had ISIS also operatives in the Philippines. And fight against them has to be very, very decisive and strong. Otherwise, we will continue living with terror. So I don't see now a peaceful resolution as long as the Hamas keeps its agenda.
Thank you for that, Ambassador. Yes, you were going to say.
It's important to say that Israel did not decide to open this war, and Israel did not want and doesn't want to be targeted. However, since we were established since 1948, but also many years before, Israel, the Jewish people have been persecuted for centuries, not in the Philippines. There is not a long history, and there is no history of hatred in the Philippines. But the Jewish people have been persecuted for centuries, and we just remember the Holocaust in the 1930s, 1940s, Second World War. But since the establishment of the State of Israel, we had the War of Independence, 1948, 1956, 1967, 1973. Basically wars by Arab countries trying to destroy Israel. This has changed in the Middle East. We have peace relations with Egypt, with Jordan, and 3 years ago, part of the Abraham Accords, we have peace. We have full diplomatic relations with the UAE, with Bahrain, with Morocco, and there are more engagements in the Gulf. So I believe that a lot of countries realize that what we are talking about today is Israel should be fully recognized and accepted as a country in the world. It is a member of the United Nations. It's friends with so many countries. So it's better to move on to recognition, to working together, to have full diplomatic and peaceful relations. At the same time, to fight together against terrorism and against violence. And I think this is what we are seeing today in the Middle East. And I hope, at the end of the day, peace and truth will prevail.
Thank you for that, Ambassador. Like you said, Israel will do everything in its power to stop terrorism and violence. Thank you so much. Our deepest sympathies and prayers are with you. Israel Ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Ilan Fuss. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much.